Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
This is Susan Kaufman, and I'm here for ADHD Experts from Attitude Magazine. I think one of the most puzzling and difficult questions parents face today is that of digital media. How do we manage our kids in a digital age? Our ADHD children and LD children are often very attracted to online media, and they're even calmed by video games. On the other hand, how does a parent select the best apps and games to help your child learn? How much is too much? I mean, it's a puzzling time for parents and a difficult question. So I'm really pleased today that our guests are Randy Kulman and James Daley. They have a wonderful website called Learning Works for Kids, which you may even want to go to while we're talking, which is an extraordinary resource to help parents specifically select the best apps and games and software to help children learn and to specifically address children's executive functions and other learning issues. Today they'll talk about a number of issues, including why and how games work for ADHD kids, what kinds of games and apps should a child with ADHD use, and their site also recommends specific apps, and they'll do some of that on the webinar as well. Theirs is a membership site. They are offering a 3-month free membership to the listeners of this webinar, which is a wonderful opportunity. Again, it is learningworksforkids.com/attitude, ADDITUDE, for that free 3-month trial. I want to be sure to mention, in addition to their website, 2 books available on Amazon. Randy Kulman is the author. The first book, which is available now, is called Train Your Brain for Success, A Teenager's Guide to Executive Functions. And coming up in April is Learning Works, Playing Smarter in a Digital World. Randy and James, thank you so much. Welcome.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you all participants for being here. We're thrilled to have so many people interested in what we're doing. This is an enormous topic. As a clinical psychologist, I became interested in it because virtually all of my patients who come in here with children with ADHD are asking questions about this. The kids are engaged and involved with digital media. They want to know what to do, and I became very, very interested in finding ways to help kids use digital media so that they could learn. So here's the deal. Kids actually learn from games. So do adults, for that matter. And one of the questions is, how can we optimize this? And you'll see here on the slide there are a number of different ways that kids are able to learn from games. Games actually change the brain. There's a recent study, for example, done using Super Mario Brothers that showed increases in the structural portions of the prefrontal cortex. There are many other games, memory games, for example, Cogmed Working Memory, and a lot of other apps and games that practice memory skills that can improve working memory, that can translate and generalize to other parts of a child's world. Active games or action games are particularly powerful tools for helping kids learn. There are a number of games that have been shown to improve selective attention skills. If you want to do a little bit of reading, Daphne Bavalier and Sean Green have written a series of articles about action games and how they help kids. A recent study just showed how action games actually can improve reading fluency, more so than actually practicing reading skills. So it's really pretty dramatic what these games can do. But the deal is, they don't cure ADHD. They don't take the symptoms away in and of themselves, but they can improve some skills. So part of our premise at what we do at Learning Works for Kids is that the games aren't enough, that most of the games provide children with an opportunity to practice skills, and in fact they practice a variety of executive functioning skills. For those of you who aren't familiar with executive functioning skills, we're talking about cognitively based self-management skills like planning, organization, working memory, cognitive flexibility, sustained focus, self-awareness. These kinds of skills are actually practiced in games when kids play the games, but unfortunately, most kids aren't able to take those skills that they're practicing in the game and apply them to the real world. Now, I want to make a quick distinction so that as we go through the webinar, you'll understand what we're saying. We typically think about games as an opportunity to practice the skills. In the game, you actually do the skill. When we use the word apps, we're going to be talking about applications that oftentimes support a skill. So, for example, an application such as Evernote might help support a skill such as organization. So it doesn't actually help the child learn the skill or practice the skill, but it's a tool that can be used to support the skill. So there are three things that are really important here that we want to make sure that we communicate. One is that if you're going to have your child play games, they're going to play games, you got to be involved. You got to play together. You got to pay attention to what they do. You got to help them with that. The second one is that you want to help them think about what they're doing in the game. We call that metacognition. And the third is you want to help them to take what they're doing in the games and take those skills that they're using in the game, whether that's planning or organization, and apply it or help them to generalize it to the real world. And you need to have activities that help make that happen. So why do we want to use video games and digital media to help children with ADHD? Well, in good part, when you look at a lot of the games that kids play, they use a variety of these executive functioning skills. Again, for many of you who are familiar with the terminology around executive functions, you'll realize that speakers such as Thomas Brown, who I listened to one of his webinars in Attitude about 2-3 months ago, essentially equate ADHD with executive function disorder. So they, Russell Barkley also, they talk about ADHD as being a disorder of executive functions. Well, video games are tremendous tools for practicing executive functions. You need to plan in virtually every video game. Time management is something that's necessary. Self-control in terms of being able to handle frustration, flexibility, moving from changing skills from one level to another. So games practice these skills. They're a great venue for that. So I want to move back away from games for a minute and just talk a little bit about what are the kinds of interventions that work best with kids with ADHD. So if you look at this, slide, you'll see the first 5 points are all essentially reflective of what we might see in great video games. Point of performance interventions. In other words, in a video game, you're doing it right then and there, you're getting feedback immediately. Okay? Powerful and engaging feedback. In a video game, it's very powerful. It's it's engaging. The kids care about it. The consequences, if they die on the level or something happens, is meaningful to them. Multimodal presentations and multiple intervention agents. In the real world, we're talking about parents and teachers doing the same thing with kids. We're talking about doing the same stuff in the school setting, on the playground, in different places. Same thing happens in video games. It happens on different levels, happens with different characters. Individualized capacity. Games are very adaptive. In other words, you can only get so far in a game based upon your skills and your knowledge. So games, again, are a tool that are very helpful in intervening in a way that helps kids with ADHD. The last point here, the strategic teaching principles, that point is a lot of what we do in our work at Learning Works for Kids. We help parents, teachers, and clinicians help to understand how to go from the game, help the kid become involved in the thinking about what they're doing in the game, and then developing real-world skills from that game. So you need to be able to strategically move from one place to another. When we teach kids with ADHD in the classroom, we use these strategic teaching principles, and we need to build these into using games as well. So here are some ideas about things that make games a good teaching tool. First of all, they're engaging. Okay, kids love playing video games. We already know that. I mean, if you have kids who like to play video games, you'll find that you can't get their attention away from the video games. In fact, I've had hundreds, if not thousands, of parents say to me, "My kid can't have ADHD. You should see him pay attention to video games." Well, yeah, they can pay attention to video games. Video games also promote motivation. There's persistence to the task. There's a willingness to overcome obstacles. They keep trying. They work really hard. Video games are also great because they're private. And so when you fail in a video game, it doesn't impact self-esteem. So if we can use it as a teaching tool, we don't have to worry about some of the self-esteem issues. Video games are great in terms of educational video games for kids because the repetition and the practice that they have, particularly in skills such as reading for kids who have problems with reading or writing or math, is powerful because they'll repeat and they'll practice in a way that they would not practice with paper and pencil measures. Okay, I want to just briefly address this, and then I'm going to turn this over to James. These are questions we get asked all the time. Typically, I think that video game play is a part of today's real world. Okay, kids need to be able to use digital media if they're going to succeed in the future, but they need to be doing many, many other things. The data that we have here, these recommendations, is more or less research-based. Most of the data says that when kids with ADHD play more than 60 minutes a day of video games, and I'm talking about on a daily school basis, that they're more prone towards signs of inattention. So that's a good limit to set. I think sometimes with teenagers you need to be a little bit different. I think that you also need to be different in terms of vacations, holidays. When you're taking that drive in the car to visit grandma that's 3 hours away and you want to have the kids be quiet, let them play the games at that point. The other part of this is that our focus at LearningWorks and what we really believe in is that video games, or what we call digital play, is only one part of a healthy play diet. And that parents need to focus on making a healthy play diet for the kids that involves lots of exercise, lots of social opportunities, times for unstructured play, times for creative play. So all those other types of play need to be more prominent, and they need to be first and foremost. And then digital play can come into the mix as well. I'll turn it over to James.
Hi, everyone. So I'm just going to take the last few minutes of our presentation here to talk a bit about what types of games and apps we recommend for kids with ADHD and how we go about selecting those games and apps, and also what you can be looking for when selecting them on your own. So the first thing, I just want to reiterate what Randy had said earlier about we look at apps and games somewhat differently. When looking at games specifically, we're looking for things that are going to practice a particular skill that a child needs to work on. If a child is particularly having a hard time with organization at school, keeping their backpack organized, organizing their writing, then we look for games in which the task is going to be organization-based, in which success in the game itself is going to rely on the player actually being organized, whether that's a role-playing game where they're organizing materials, something like a Minecraft where they have to keep all of these different elements organized. Those are the kind of things that we're looking for in games that actually practice a particular skill and therefore improve that executive function. For apps, we look at things that are going to be more supportive. In that sense, I mean things that are going to actually help a kid accomplish a task that they're having a hard time with, whether that be using dictation software for kids that have a hard time with writing and getting started with writing, or any of the great to-do list and timer type apps that help kids stay on task throughout a day. So that's what we mean when we talk about apps and games. In terms of what types of games, particularly for kids with ADHD, active and puzzle games are always really great choices. The active games help kids to get more exercise, and research has shown that when kids do exercise throughout the day, they're able to focus more and pay more attention to things. Puzzle games are the types of games that usually practice the thinking skills and executive functions that kids with ADHD need to work on the most. It's important that when selecting a game, you look at the proper age developmentally, the proper developmental level of the game, not just the age rating of the game. Games are often rated based on their maturity level, but just because a game is the right level based on maturity for a child doesn't mean it's developmentally the right level. So I noticed in one of the comments on the blog post on Attitude Magazine's website, people had asked, don't tell me so much about the types of games, I want specific games. And one of the things that we really do is we give you specific recommendations, not only for the actual games and apps, but recommendations that are tailored to specific individual children. Here's just an example of one of the games that we recommend for kids with ADHD. Amazing Alex is an iOS game, iPhone and iPad game primarily. One of the reasons we think it's so great for ADHD is because it's good at practicing planning, flexibility, and focus skills. Essentially, it's a game where the player creates these kind of Rube Goldberg-esque contraptions where a stack of books knocks over a ball, which rolls down a hill and then hits a baseball bat, and that makes a contraption go off, and the player reaches their goal. And we recognize this as being great for kids with ADHD because it forces them to do things like plan out a number of steps before they start going through the game, and then actually maintain their focus while accomplishing those tasks. If you don't think about this puzzle before you start doing it, you're not going to be able to complete it, and you're not going to reach the next level of the game. In that sense, the game itself is forcing kids to actually use their brains the way that we want them to be using their brains. We want them to be using their brains in a way that has them take a step back from a task and think about it beforehand, plan out their steps, and then actually fulfill each one of those steps in order. And if they get the reward of going to the next level, as they do in Amazing Alex, then they can start to improve that skill in a generalizable way. So with the last 2 minutes here, I just want to talk a little bit specifically about Learning Works for Kids and what we do here. Learning Works for Kids is essentially a platform that we've created for helping parents find the best apps and games for their specific children, and then showing parents how to use those apps and games to best improve the skills that their children need help with the most. We think of this as kind of a three-step process, and first we assess each child's critical thinking, executive functioning, and academic strengths and weaknesses with an extensive assessment that parents can fill out when they first sign up for the site. Then based on the results of that assessment, parents are given detailed lists of recommendations that are tailored from our hundreds and hundreds of game guides and app guides to just the ones that are going to be right for each particular child. And that's based on the executive functions that they need the most help with, if they have a diagnosed developmental issue, ADHD, autism, or a number of other learning issues that might be troubling with them. And then the final thing is to actually help parents use these games and apps with their children. And this is really the most important part as we see it. It's not just that we say, okay, go out and buy these games and apps and then you're fine. The idea is to actually show parents this is how you can play this app together with your child. These are the specific goals you can set if you're playing a game with your child. These are the specific activities that this app can help your child accomplish, so that you're doing more than just downloading something on their iPad and then sending them on their way, because that's really where the improvement in learning comes from. And that concludes the slideshow portion of this. We've got the link up there if you want to go to that link, learningworksforkids.com/attitude. The site itself is a subscription-based site. That link will give you a free 3-month membership. Also let you download our ebook, The Flippin' Parent's Guide to ADHD. It just asks for your email, and then you can do both of those things.
We're ready for you, Susan.
Okay, that was great. Thank you for that introduction. As I'm sure you know, there are lots of questions about asking about for recommendations for specific apps, and also asking about specific games or apps.
Great.
One that's come up a great deal among the audience is Minecraft. Mm-hmm. So if you could talk some more about Minecraft and its value, what ages will be helped by using Minecraft, and anything that you might recommend, because there are numerous questions on the subject as to how to monitor the amount of time spent on Minecraft specifically. Is that a common one, Minecraft?
I'm laughing. It is so funny. I had the great opportunity to do 2 presentations at the Chad National Conference this year, and when I asked how many of the parents in the audience have had kids who play Minecraft, I swear 95% of those hands.
Wow.
I mean, it's just it's so funny. And in my clinical practice, the same thing happens. I'll ask kids, what do you love to do? What do you like to do? I like to play Minecraft. And some of the kids play for hours and hours, and it's really too much. It is a great learning game in terms of the skills that are needed. It's skills that are used from an executive function standpoint. It's a terrific game. We recommend it for kids over the age of 6, and it's probably one of the more difficult games to sort of take away from your kids, but at the same time, that's what you need to do, and people do need to be able to set limits on that. Before we talked a little bit about, we had a chart up there about, really that hour a day is really a really good place to kind of to stick to if you can. You have to find ways to do that with parents and with the children, and that again is complicated and probably worthy of talking for hours in some ways, but it's certainly one of the games that we think is actually good for kids. And interestingly enough, this is a little bit of a sidelight, but we've been conducting this study in my office where we've got probably about 200 families of kids with ADHD who've been completing a survey. And they tell us about what kinds of activities do the kids play or use that where they don't show the signs of ADHD. So in other words, we ask them, what activities are your child least likely to show signs of hyperactivity, inattention, or disorganization? And what we find is the first thing that they tell us is playing with video games. Second one is watching the television. The third one, interestingly enough, is playing with Legos. And for those of you who are familiar with Minecraft, some people refer to it as Legos on steroids. So it's one of those games that really seems to grab the attention of kids with ADHD. I've often thought about wanting to do a study amongst college-age students or teenagers who are playing it and see how many of them actually have ADHD who are really into it, because it's so powerful of a game.
That's really fascinating. Wow. Okay.
I'd like to add a little bit more just about specifically how we talk about Minecraft on the site and the kind of things that we recommend people do when they have a child with ADHD who is really involved with Minecraft and loves to play it. As with any game that can be addictive, obviously finding ways to set limits is important. But even more important, I think, right off the bat, and we say this about all of the games that we recommend, is you have to get to know it yourself. This is something, and in the case of Minecraft, it's really a world that your children are spending so much time in. It's a part of their life, and often in a very real way. And I think the kind of the first responsibility of parents is just to get to know a little bit about that world. Minecraft in particular is not a terribly difficult game. It's not like one of these fast-paced action shoot-'em-up games where your thumbs probably aren't even dexterous enough to make it work. It's fairly slow-paced. It's easy to get into. And first thing I would recommend everybody do is just spend a little time in it. Load it up on your computer, walk around the world, see what it's all about. But the kind of things that we recommend for Minecraft are to try to make it work specifically for the skills that you think your child needs to improve. So one of the things that Minecraft is great for is planning. There's different ways that you can play Minecraft. A lot of a lot of the kids that we come across, and most of the ones who like to play it for extended periods of time, play it in the creative mode, where they're creating these wonderful cities and buildings and landscapes using Minecraft kind of as a Lego set in that sense. And so even just doing things like talking about things that they could create together and then having them go create them and then show them to you. So, talking first about, okay, well, how about you try creating our block that we live on? And then you can talk about, well, all right, well, what would we need to put in there? You can talk about, we can put in the neighbor's house, and, we might want to have, Sam the dog next door running around in the yard, all of the different things that you can put into it. You can show them that process of planning a project before you start, thinking about all the different tools they're going to need in the Minecraft environment to make that happen, and then they can go off and do it and then show you later. And it kind of creates not only that great time that you guys can connect over something like that, but it also helps to develop that skill of planning, which you can then, when they're having a hard time getting started on a project for school, you can make connections and say, well, what you're doing now with this science project is the same thing we did last week together with Minecraft. You need to plan what you want to do. We need to think about the materials, and then we need to develop a plan and follow it in order to complete it and get there. And that's really one of the things that we try and show, is that the kinds of tasks that kids are doing in these games, and Minecraft is such a great example of this, are so similar to the tasks that they have a hard time with in school, the tasks that we want them to be better with in general. And if we can get involved and do these tasks together in some degree, or at least talk about them in the digital environment, in the game environment, then we can help to make those connections to the real world, to the school environment where we want to see the improvements.
That's a really good idea. One of the people on the webinar suggested asking your child to teach you how to play Minecraft, which seems like a pretty inspired idea.
Fantastic idea.
Yeah.
Susan, two more quick points. If people want to find out ways to use it from an educational standpoint, there's a great website put together by this guy, Joel Levin. It's called MinecraftEDU.com. So it's Minecraft, just edu.com. And they have special servers that are using Minecraft for teaching, not executive skills for the most part, but more academic skills. And I think that's, that could be a very useful site for people. The other thing is we have probably 4 or 5 articles, blog posts written specifically about projects to use Minecraft for teaching skills beyond our typical playbooks on this website. So we have there's a whole pile of content on the website about using Minecraft to help kids with ADHD.
That's great. That's really great. I don't know Minecraft, so I'm going to have to go look it up. One of the questions posted to the website was specifically about the game Roblox, Roblox.
Yeah.
And the parent has a 13-year-old son who is, in fact, she says, and the school confirms, is addicted. Gets up at 6 in the morning to see whether, quote, a hat is going limited. Can't focus on his homework, is failing everything at school, splits his screen with Roblox on one side and schoolwork on the other. So what do you advise for a parent like this? Is Roblox potentially as helpful as Minecraft if it's used properly? Or is it more, what about the addiction issue, which I think is most of our parents' concern, which may be actually keeping people from using games that might be helpful.
Well, that addiction issue is a very legitimate concern amongst kids with ADHD. We know kids with ADHD, for example, have problems with transitioning from one activity to another. By definition, whether that has to do anything to do with video games, it can have to do with other kinds of things as well. We know we also know that when we look at family histories of people with ADHD, that there's also histories of other kinds of addictions. So
right.
those are very legitimate concerns and things that people should be very aware of. I think Roblox, and I'll let James talk a little more specifically about the game, is a similar game to Minecraft. We actually think it could be even kids a little bit younger than kids who can play Minecraft can use it. But again, parents need to be there supervising, particularly with young kids. I mean, when we talk about using video games with young kids, a couple of things come to mind. One is, games need to be in public areas. The second is the parents need to know exactly what those kids are doing. They need to be there. And, we would like to see parents be a little bit more engaged and involved. And even if that's simply asking the kids questions about what they're doing. If you ever want to get a kid to talk to you that doesn't want to talk, just ask them what they're doing in a video game. They'll talk. So, so Roblox, again, I think but again, setting those effective limits is really what has to happen. I mean, in some families, if the kid's getting online and doing something like that, because Roblox is it's an online game, that they have to, sometimes they have to shut the internet off at different times of the day. I mean, you can do that. If you can put the router in your bedroom if you really need to, and shut it off at 9 o'clock at night and put it on again after the kids go to school in the morning.
Right. Several people have mentioned that they use Minecraft as a motivator or a reward. Miss Janine says, I don't know if my son would even go to school if we didn't dangle the Minecraft carrot over his head. He only gets it once his homework is done, and he gets 1 hour a night. So does that sound like a reasonable way to go?
Yes. In fact, one of the things that I've written extensively about are different schedules that families use.
Interesting.
And in terms of using video games, and the participant just described sort of two of them at once, which is one is after your homework is done. That's one schedule, and the second schedule is an hour a day. So, yeah, right. I think that's and by the way, in our research that we've done here in my office, the after your homework done was 40% of the parents endorsed that as the strategy or schedule that they use. So that's probably the most common one.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense, because how can you get your homework done if you're playing Minecraft while you're doing your homework? It makes sense.
Exactly. And one of the things that parents can also do is not just use the game as a motivator for doing other things, but they can say things like, you can use the game, you can play this game if you do this activity that is going to make that game more educational. So for Roblox in particular, we give a number of different activities that parents can do with their kids, how they can help them, arrange their digital workspace in the Roblox studio to make it a great organization activity to teach them organization through using Roblox, which works very similar in a lot of ways to Minecraft. So for example, instead of just saying, okay, you can do whatever you want on Roblox as long as you finish your homework first, you can also do as supplementary to that or on different days. You can play Roblox for an hour, hour and a half even tonight if you do this organization activity where, you create something, make it organized, and then talk to us about how you went about creating that organization in your Roblox studio.
Right. What's the relationship between TV and games? People are saying, should I have a set amount of screen time that includes video games and TV? Is one more harmful than the other? Do you have a point of view? I know you're about apps and games, but I assume you have a point of view on screens in general.
Sure. Yeah, we think a lot about digital media and digital play in general. So here's what the data says. The good data, at least as I read it, is the data says that television is far more problematic than playing video games. Television is passive, video games are active. There's a big difference there. Most video games, believe it or not, are social these days. So the games that we're talking about, Minecraft is a hugely social game. I mean, not only are kids playing with each other, from home or on their tablets, but they're going to school and they're talking about it. Okay, so there's an enormous difference. The studies that look at obesity, for example, there's far more data that talks about obesity being related to television watching than to video game play. So there's a lot of reasons to say if you have to choose the lesser of two evils, if you will, from this perspective, that you would definitely choose video games. But here's the reality. The reality is that our kids today are spending a lot of time in front of screens. The Kaiser Foundation did a study in 2010. They found that the kids between the ages of 8 and 18 are spending an average of 7 hours, 38 minutes per day with digital media. I'll repeat that.
Wow.
7 hours, 38 minutes a day. This is a really great study, too. This is a study of thousands of kids. The Kaiser Foundation did it. What they found also is that if it took into account multitasking, it's actually 10 and a half hours a day. And the most amount of time is spent watching TV. Video games, believe it or not, in the Kaiser Foundation study were third. So watching TV was number one, listening to music was number two, and then playing video games was number three. So they're spending a lot of time watching TV. Nowadays, TV is very different, too, because you can get TV, when you want it. You can get it on Hulu. You can watch what you want when you want to watch it. You can put it on a DVR. So it's very different. You can watch it on all kinds of devices. So it's changing.
On the Minecraft issue, not to focus unduly on Minecraft, because I suggest I imagine it's just one of this genre. But Kelly has two ADHD sons who like to watch videos of other people playing Minecraft, and she wants to know your thoughts. And let me guess, that's not active, as they're not actually playing; they're watching other people play. Does that count in their 1 hour?
Well, it's not active in quite the same way, but the presumption is that they're not watching these videos if they're not also playing at different times. So essentially, they're watching these videos as educational videos in the same way that you might watch a video in a science class about a lab experiment and then go and do that lab experiment. And it can depend on the videos, but with Minecraft in particular, often these videos are showing people creating things. They're showing people how people are going about creating these amazing things in the Minecraft environment. And then once kids watch these videos, they go and they experiment with ways of doing that as well. So,
okay.
I mean, it probably is important to draw a distinction between, just purely watching video content, whatever it is. And I've got a 6-year-old daughter, and I don't think she understands that the thing in the living room even plays TV shows. She only watches TV shows. But, I think it's important to make that distinction. But certainly, I think it's different to be, for example, watching these Minecraft videos that they're then going to experiment with, and they're certainly watching them a lot more actively than, I mean, when I watch some of these Disney shows that my kids like, I would much rather than be watching Minecraft videos, watching
yeah.
somebody do something creative and interesting rather than, just being sold products for half an hour or whatever else.
So if I can add to that too, a couple of things to this. You bring up an excellent point here when you ask about the videos. This is another way that technology, not so much games per se, but the technology can be very helpful. I know of lots of kids who have created their own, what they call Let's Play videos, which show people how to play these games, and they post them on YouTube. So they have to create a video, they have to edit the video, they have to organize, they have to think about what's going to be important to people. I know of kids who have actually done this stuff with, like Call of Duty and other kinds of games, teenagers who come in here, and they make money from it because they get advertising on YouTube for that. A lot of kids also who are interested in Minecraft learn programming skills. They learn to be able to modify the game, and they really learn a lot of creativity skills as well. So in the production of these kinds of tools or games, there's all kinds of other things that are happening. I mean, I oftentimes think about creativity in teenagers. Now when we think about creativity in teenagers today, oftentimes happens with digital media and technologies. And if you go back even 20 years, I'm not sure how teenagers were being creative. It's very easy for us to think about a 5-year-old doing some drawings and doing other kinds of imaginative play, but we don't think about teenagers doing that. But in today's world, teenagers can be creative by using technologies, and they're incredible like that.
There's a concern among a number of the participants about inappropriate behavior, inappropriate language, and also violence when kids move up, I guess, from Minecraft to more war games, shoot-'em-up games. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, certainly the types of content that a parent will be okay with their child playing is a decision that they have to make. We don't really recommend any of these mature games. I think it's really important for a lot of parents to understand that, especially when you're talking about the bigger budget console games, the average age of a gamer today is, I believe, 30 years old. So
wow.
The idea that games are created for kids anymore is not necessarily the case, and it's that 18 and over crowd that has the highest disposable income to spend on games, and that a lot of these game makers really court in terms of development. And the games they're rated, and even though there might be a lot of other kids playing them, they are really not appropriate, or a lot of them are really not appropriate.
Okay. So it's important to monitor that transition from these child games to these more adult war games.
Yeah, it's important to educate yourself too, because there's, as soon as something gets something like something simple like any image of red blood, I think is one of the things that they look at, then you automatically have a situation where they call that an M-rated game. Now, you have some of these M-rated games that your kid might play at a friend's house and that are basically no worse than a PG-13 movie. And then there are others that are just incredibly mature where you wouldn't want them even watching somebody else play them. So I think it's also important to kind of educate yourself more than on more than just the rating.
All right. Can we turn to apps to help with organization specifically and with educational skills? There's specific questions about, for example, writing. Are there apps that you might recommend to help kids tap into their thoughts and organize their writing skills? This is very different, I know, from Minecraft, but an area in which there's a lot of interest.
Well, yeah, there's different ways that we look at writing in particular. So there are writing apps and apps that support writing that deal with the act of writing. And I'll let Randy talk about this in a second. The dictation apps, Dragon Dictation is great, typing apps, apps that actually help kids to do the act of writing. And then there's the organization aspect of it, which it's a very different kind of a place that kids are coming from in terms of writing. So for organization, one of my favorites is Evernote. Evernote gives kids a great way to, and everybody, I use it myself for pretty much every project that I do, to have lots of different note cards with their ideas on it, to organize those note cards in ways to kind of get their ideas organized before sitting down to write. Google Docs we talk about a lot. I'm surprised at how few kids use Google Docs, because it's a great way to be able to share with your parents or with your teachers or with anybody else who is sharing with you your ideas as you're creating them, to create simple lists and then go about looking at them together, making comments on them. I'm always looking at my older daughter's essays on Google Docs, and you can write lots of little comments in the sidebar, and they get to see all of them right next to a picture of you. It's fantastic for that side of it. LiveScribe is another good one for some of that organization. But I'll let everybody talk a little bit about the dictation and typings. He's done a lot of work.
That would be helpful.
I'm very interested in this because of my clinical work with kids with ADHD. I think that the data suggests that about 60% of kids with ADHD may have some difficulties with writing in one way or another. A lot of kids with ADHD might have a comorbid disorder of the developmental coordination disorder, and some of those kids have major difficulties with handwriting, legibility, fine motor issues. And I find that so many of these kids that I see are so frustrated by the simple task of writing that they hate school, and that we really need to find some ways to kind of overcome that with these kids with ADHD. At a young level, I am a huge advocate of teaching kids to type. Forget about cursive. I don't care about any of that stuff. I'm always having this discussion with my patients. So I oftentimes recommend a piece of software called Typing Instructor for Kids. It's a really nice piece of software. It's really easy. It's got a lot of games. It teaches kids to type the right way. There are a couple of other apps that might be useful. One is called Drop, D-R-O-P. Another is called Tap Typing. And another is called Burning Fingers. But I like starting with the Typing Instructor. And again, I actually wrote a series of articles about this last summer, about how typing may be the most important skill we want a kid with ADHD and any kind of writing issues to learn. The second tool that I love is Dragon Dictation. And I'm not even talking necessarily about Dragon Dictation, that's the formal $200 program that you have to buy. I think that kids can learn to use Dragon Dictation if they're taught properly to learn how to write with it on their cell phones. If any of you have an iPhone, I think from 4S up, you can use it with your notes. You can download Dragon Dictation. Most of the Android smartphones, you can do the same thing. But kids need to be taught how to use it. It's not just being taught how to speak into a phone and get it to print out, but they need to be taught to speak in prose. They need to be taught to be able to maybe use it for brainstorming. Most of the time that I see kids who really struggle with writing, the biggest problem they have is organization of their writing, and the second biggest problem is just getting started. If you can
getting started is very big.
It's impossible for some of these kids. It really is. But if we can get them to talk into their cell phone, even having a parent ask them a question, who was the main character in the book? And teach them. You're going to say the main character in the book was blank. And so they're writing in sentences. If we can teach them to do that, they can do that on their phone. They can upload it, and then they can start editing and working with it. But at least they have something. So these are tools that my prediction is in 5 years that this is what we're going to be doing with kids who have writing issues, particularly that group of kids with ADHD and learning disabilities who really struggle with writing. We're going to be doing that with a lot of them.
That's really interesting. And I know I've just found from being on webinars that many experts, and these are highly educated PhDs in many cases, are much more articulate verbally than they are in writing. So it makes sense that the way to start would be to talk and then to go from there. Yeah, that's really makes a lot of sense.
But you do need to learn how to go from having a conversation to being able to write in prose. We've actually done a little bit of research on that in the office. We're actually setting up a program this summer for kids who come into my office for doing that, to teach them how to use Dragon Dictation for writing skills. And so it's we're trying to do like a 4 to 6 session program to help kids with this, because it's not something that's going to happen automatically. They're not going to just pick up a dictation device and be able to do it.
Right. Right. So they really need help figuring out how to take that language and turn it into organized prose. That makes sense.
Yeah.
What about tracking homework, tasks, and those kinds of organizational demands for kids? Do you have any suggestions for apps or tools for keeping track of your homework, your assignments, and getting things in on time, which is a perennial problem?
So yeah, one of the things that I didn't really mention earlier in terms of talking about this is that most of the games and apps that we're using on our website, in addition to the fact that, by the way, we don't really have any M-rated games, and part of it is because I just find the violence to be so problematic myself. But most of the things that we have on the site are really not specific to, for example, ADHD or autism spectrum disorders. We do have a lot of more general apps, like, for example, Evernote, or things that are popularly used, in part because those apps and games are so well made that they're popular, people enjoy using them, and they can be very helpful. We do have a few different apps like that. James is going to kind of comment on a couple of those.
Yeah, and one of the perennial favorites is My Homework. My Homework is an app that's available for Android, iPad, iPhone. You can have it online, download it on a Mac or PC. It allows kids to schedule and organize their homework, create specific class profiles for each of their classes. It has a calendar. It's really a great tool for kind of keeping organized, knowing what's due on what day, how to get each of those things done. There's a lot of other good general organization apps out there. Wunderlist is the top one that comes to mind. Wunderlist is a great, and that's really for any age. It's a great just to-do task app that allows you to set priorities to given tasks, to kind of break tasks down into, a project, and then all of the individual tasks that go in to make up that project, set deadlines. Another great thing about Wunderlist is that it's really just available on almost any device or screen you can imagine putting it on. You're going to find a Wunderlist app for it, and My Homework is pretty much the same way.
They sound terrific.
Yeah.
I think if I've heard in all the webinars we've had, the number one problem, probably the one that's repeated the most often, is either not bringing home the homework and assignment or not turning in the homework. So My Homework and Wunderlist sound seriously helpful. What about brain training? There's a lot of interest in knowing more about Lumosity, which of course does a tremendous amount of advertising, CogMed, other sorts of brain training programs, online programs. Do you have any point of view from your work with games and apps on those programs?
Sure. First, let me give a little bit of a disclaimer here. I am a CogMed working memory training provider, so I've had some experience with that, but I'm also, in a sense, an advocate of it. And essentially what CogMed is a series of short video games that challenge memory, both auditory, verbal working memory, and visual spatial working memory. And if people do it, and that is they exercise their brain, and it's hard work. They're doing it. The original plan was to do it for 40 minutes a day over the course of 5 weeks, and then follow-ups once a week. And now we've changed the kind of scheduling so you can do it in a little bit shorter periods. But it's work, but it also does work. Lumosity is interesting in that it helps you to chart kind of people's progress. It's really primarily more for adults. There are other ones out there. There's one called Mind 360, another one called Cognifit. Brain HQ is another one. I mentioned Happy Neuron. So there's a series of these sort of brain training programs that are available online. Here's the thing that we find about that is they're interesting. They're games and technology. They're not a whole lot of fun. A lot of the games that we've selected on our site that are kind of the more casual games that you can do online or you can do on your tablet do many of the same things. We can't, unfortunately at this point, we can't chart the kids' progress, but they practice the same skills in a far more inviting manner so that the kids want to keep playing it and get better at it because they're engaging. Whereas the games that are those other games that are online, which can be helpful, but the engagement factor is much less than what you can see in many of the popular casual games.
Yes, which is really one of the inspiring things for Learning Works for Kids is that if you play all of these kind of edutainment games, the specifically educational brain training games, or especially if you try and get a kid to play them, they still feel like work.
Right.
And if it feels like work, what's the point of making it into a game? You might as well just have it be work in the first place. So that's really one of the things that we try and do is we try and identify games that have the same mechanics or similar mechanics to these kind of brain training activity games, but were designed first and foremost by real game designers in order to be entertaining and fun and engaging, so that they meet that hurdle, which is a hard hurdle to overcome. People spend a lot of time and money just trying to make a game entertaining, much less to try and do that while making it educational.
Yeah, one of the things that we do on our website is we have instead of having an IQ, we have an LQ, or a learning quotient, for all the games and apps. And the learning quotient essentially takes into account, has a fun score and a brain score, because we think that both of those things are what's crucial for these tools to be great learning tools for the kids. They got to be fun for the kids to engage in them and keep practicing with them.
That makes sense, because I think none of these things work unless you do it. And as you say, if it's work and it's not fun, it's going to be hard to spend the time on the game. Here's a person who recommends Activate, which your kids love. So have you heard of Activate?
I'm not sure. I don't think we have that.
Interesting.
Activate.
Yeah.
Do you know what platform it's on?
No, I don't. Just type that in. What about math? People are asking for recommendations or games or apps that help with learning fractions and just in general on the math side of the equation.
Yeah, there are a lot of great ones. I know one of the ones that my daughter's school uses and that she actually likes is IXL Math. IXL is a great tool that charts kids. It helps to teach them all different types of math skills, but also charts their progress.
Can you say the name again?
IXL Math.
IXL, okay.
Another good one is really BrainPop has some excellent math-based videos and games. BrainPop Junior for younger kids. They're primarily online, but they also have apps. BrainPop, if you go to brainpop.com, they really cover a broad range of topics.
Okay.
Their math stuff is particularly great. They have some really fun videos. And a lot of great kind of math games in there.
We have a couple of people who've mentioned online Khan Academy, of course, KHAN Academy.com, as having free great material, and their kids, they say, really love it. So.
Yeah, the Khan Academy is great. It's not as much fun as, say, IXL Math or Dreambox Math, where it's more animated and that kind of, or BrainPop. But for kids at higher levels of math, where you're not going to find some of these math games out there, the Khan Academy is an incredible tool. And for those of you who haven't been there, I would suggest you go visit. It's wild.
It's amazing. It really is. Khan Academy, for the person who typed in, it's KHAN, not CON, Khan Academy. We've thrown out so many names of great apps and games. For everyone who's asking to have those repeated, we will put up a transcript in which we'll pull out and list in a box the names of all the apps. So if you'll be patient, those will be on the site, attitudemag.com/webinars. You'll find a recap of the best apps and games. So any last bits of advice, Randy and company?
Well, Susan, just to help people with finding the best games, apps and games, if they do want to go to the website, it's very easy for them to go and to each area with the games and the apps. They can sort through the games and apps and actually find games and apps rated by our learning quotient. So they can find the ones that we think are best for different categories. So if they're looking for a great organizational app, they might just go there, put in organization and click on the rating scales and find the best steps. So that's another way that they can find some other
Okay.
ones that we didn't mention as well.
Yeah.
Very last question. What about behavior modification? There are a number of parents here who are saying, are there any apps to use for impulse control or to get your behavioral tasks done? This is sort of outside the education realm, I think, the behavior.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of one. We just recently put up a playbook on, I think I want to call it like iBehavior or something like that. Or iReward chart. iReward chart is what it is, I believe.
iReward chart. Oh, that's great.
Chart, I believe. Is that?
Yeah,
Someone mentioned, Valerie posted, Chore Monster is helpful.
Yeah, we've got guides up on Chore Monster and iReward chart. Chore Monster is great. Helps kids to get chores done, accomplish those kind of goals. iReward chart lets them, really kind of get rewards for doing different kinds of tasks and behavior modification. We've got a few other really good ones here. Let's see, Breathe to Relax.
Wow.
That one's more for anxiety and stress. And,
That's interesting. Okay. Well, this is great. You guys are just a font of information. Randy and James, thank you so much. And to the audience, check out the website. Check out Randy's books on Amazon, Randy Kulman, Kulman. Thank you, everyone, and have a great week.
Thank you.
For more Attitude podcasts and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.